I've always had a talent for sabotaging myself. From middle school through the start of college, I became my own worst obstacle when it came to relationships, especially with girls I admired from a distance. Despite several attempts to get closer, something always blocked my efforts. Usually it was me. Whether I said the wrong thing at the wrong time or hesitated when boldness was needed, my doubts constantly held me back. In high school, I developed an intense attraction to one girl in particular. It wasn't just a fleeting crush. It felt like a gravitational force. No matter how hard I tried to move on, she was always on my mind. Over time, I found myself torn between trying too hard to get noticed and convincing myself it was better to stay invisible. Little did I know my awkwardness would follow me into college, and that same girl would still be on my mind. Her name was Rebecca Ann Courtney. I'd admired her from afar since 7th grade, but no matter how much I fantasized about being with her, I knew deep down it wasn't meant to be. The truth was, Rebecca couldn't stand me. She tolerated my presence only because we shared mutual friends, but I never understood why she disliked me. At first, I thought she just didn't know me well enough, so I tried to fix that. Whenever I saw her, I'd say hi, but though she'd acknowledge me, she'd turn away or just walk off. Throughout 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grades, I must have asked her out 50 times, but she never gave me the time of day. In 12th grade, she started dating Frank Devon, so I stopped asking her out. I wasn't expecting to see Becky after graduation, so it surprised me when I saw her on her first day of college. I'd heard she was going to a school out east. By then, I'd gotten over my feelings for Becky, so I didn't bother saying hi when I saw her. Fate, or the gods, must have enjoyed messing with me because Becky was always around. It turned out we both chose to major in business management, so we shared a lot of classes. Did I still have feelings for Rebecca Ann? I often asked myself. And the answer was, of course, yes. But I had learned from past mistakes, so I did my best to ignore her. It wasn't easy, and sometimes it was incredibly tough. It seemed like every 4th class had group projects, and the instructors usually assigned groups alphabetically. Since Courtney and Connors were close in the alphabet, we often ended up in the same group. Fortunately, when it came time to divide tasks for the project, I didn't have to work directly with Becky. I wasn't sure I could handle it. One thing I noticed, though, was that whenever our groups met to work, Becky always seemed to look at me when I looked at her. I didn't know what that meant, but I chose not to dwell on it. I made it through my first year without embarrassing myself and looked forward to summer break. Did I mention fate and the gods like to mock me? My family owns a business, and I've worked there part-time since I was 13. Summer is our busiest time, and Dad always hires extra help for the season. A week after school ended, I arrived at work, and Dad called me into his office. When I walked in, Rebecca Courtney was sitting there. As soon as I entered, Dad said, "Good news and bad news, Harry. The bad news, Charlie had a family emergency and had to fly home to Maine. He expects to be gone for a month or 2. The good news, instead of working for Charlie this summer, you'll be the temporary shipping and receiving manager. Shouldn't be a problem. You've worked here full-time for 2 of the last 3 years and part-time since you were 14. He nodded toward Becky and added, "I need to introduce you to Rebecca. I hired her to take your place while you play the role of manager." "I already know Miss Courtney," I said, surprising Dad. He raised an eyebrow, not because I knew Becky, but because I called her Miss Courtney instead of Rebecca, or Becky. He didn't say anything about it then, but I knew he'd want to know what that was about before the day ended. "All right," Dad said. "Show Rebecca around, make sure she knows where everything is, and then get to work." I spent about 20 minutes giving Becky a tour of the production facilities. I showed her both women's restrooms, the lounge, and where the snack machines were located. I introduced her to Marla and Ashley from purchasing, Janice from accounting, and Alice from quality control. Then I took her to the shipping and receiving department and introduced her to Tom and Jerry, who worked there as well. I explained what we did and what her responsibilities would be. When I finished, I asked, "Do you have any questions?" Instead of asking about the job, she looked at me and said, "Why don't you love me?" Her question completely caught me off guard. It took me a moment to gather myself before responding. I recalled something one of my English teachers had said. When something isn't clear, ask questions. "Why do you think I don't love you?" I asked. "You know me, and you know I prefer to call you Becky. So, what's with this Miss Courtney stuff? And why have you been cold and distant toward me in classes?" I chose the easy way out. "This is a personal matter, Miss Courtney, and it doesn't belong at work. Maybe one day when we're not at work, we can talk about it. But for now, we need to focus on the Hamilton order and be ready when UPS arrives around 1 o'clock. Her expression told me she wasn't finished with the conversation, but work took priority for the moment. As Jerry showed her how everything worked, I couldn't stop wondering what had just happened. After 6 years of her ignoring me, she suddenly wanted to know why I didn't love her? It didn't add up. She had spent years pushing me away, and now she wanted to know why I wasn't chasing her? I brushed those thoughts aside and got back to work. After lunch, I went to the purchasing department to ask Ashley about the packaging materials we were waiting for. She said they'd arrive the next day, then asked with a smirk, "How did you manage to get your girlfriend a job here?" "She's not my girlfriend," I replied. "And I didn't even know she was working here until this morning." Ashley grinned. "She's not your girlfriend? Come on, Harry, she sure wants to be." I laughed it off and went back to shipping and receiving. The next 2 days passed with minimal interaction between Becky and me. On the third day, I was having lunch at the diner near work, when Becky walked in, spotted me, and sat down across from me. "We're not at work, Harold, and we're off the clock. So, tell me, what's with the Miss Courtney thing, and why don't you love me?" I sighed and turned the question back on her. "Why do you expect me to love you? Given how you've treated me since 7th grade, why would I? You've rejected my invitations more than once. You mentioned coldness the other day, remember? Miss Courtney, haven't you been cold and distant toward me for all those years? Why, after treating me like that, would you expect me to be warm and friendly? I don't hate you, but I've become indifferent because of how things were." Her expression changed. She wasn't used to being spoken to like that, and it clearly didn't sit well with her. But she had asked, and I had answered. She looked at me with an unreadable expression, then stood up and left without saying a word. The rest of the week went by quietly. Although we worked close to each other, we rarely spoke, limiting our conversations to work-related topics. On Saturday afternoon, I went to the country club where my family has a membership. Becky's family also had memberships there, and I'd seen her around over the years. As luck would have it, she was there with 2 friends from high school. I have to admit, seeing the 3 of them in swimsuits made quite an impression. At one point, I noticed them glancing in my direction while Becky said something to them. They smiled and nodded, and I couldn't help but wonder what they were talking about. I had no intention of asking. The club's cafeteria serves a fantastic half-pound burger, so I stopped to order one. While waiting, Sarah Wilcox and Carol Perry came in, saw me, and sat down without asking. These were the same girls Becky had been talking to earlier by the pool. "What's new, Harry? How's it going? Long time no see," Carol chimed in. I immediately sensed something wasn't right. I had known both Carol and Sarah since 3rd grade, but we were never the type to strike up casual conversations like this. The fact that they had just been talking with Becky only heightened my suspicion. "Warning, Harry," I thought. "Danger ahead. I've been busy with classes, and now that it's summer, my dad has me working full-time," I replied. "Are you and Polina still together? I haven't heard from her since she went east for school," Sarah asked. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "Are you free tonight?" "Nothing planned, why?" I answered cautiously. "There's a party I want to go to, but I need a date. If I go alone, I'll get hassled all night." I could feel the alarms ringing in my head. "Warning, Harry, this feels like trouble." But my curiosity got the better of me. "I think I'd like that," I agreed. Sarah shot a grin at Carol. "Looks like someone missed their chance." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "Carol was going to invite you, but I beat her to it." That's when it clicked. This was a setup. Carol, who I knew wasn't into guys, wouldn't have been inviting me to anything. We agreed on a time for me to pick up Sarah, and just as my burger arrived, the 2 of them left. As I sat there eating, I kept trying to figure out what was going on. No matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't make sense of it. I picked Sarah up at 7, and she told me the party was at Marlene Cantrell's place. Marlene was another girl I knew from school. We had dated a few times, but it didn't work out. We stayed friends, though we weren't particularly close. When we arrived, Marlene opened the door, smiling, though I could tell she was surprised to see me with Sarah. She welcomed us and showed us to the terrace where there were drinks, alcoholic and non-alcoholic punch, and a keg of beer. Sarah and I mingled and danced for a while. About half an hour into the party, I saw Becky walking out of the house with Marlene. Becky noticed us, said something to Marlene, and then made a beeline for Sarah and me. She tapped Sarah on the shoulder. "Mind if I cut in?" Becky asked sweetly. "Sure," Sarah said, stepping aside. Becky moved in, smiling. "Hello, Harry," she said, her tone playful. "Hello, Becky," I replied, though my mind was racing. "What's going on?" I asked, surprising her. "Going on with what?" she asked, frowning. "Why did you get Sarah to bring me here?" Becky's demeanor shifted immediately from casual to serious. "I didn't think we were that obvious," she admitted, her voice calm but direct. "I needed to talk to you somewhere private. I figured if I asked you directly, you wouldn't agree. But if I got you here casually, you'd be more open to it. Well, you've definitely gotten my attention, I said. Let's sit down and I'll explain, she suggested. We left the dance floor and she led me to a couple of chairs on the grass after pouring herself a drink from the alcoholic punch bowl. Once we sat down, she didn't waste any time. After our talk last week about why you don't love me, I started reflecting on our past. I never really considered how my behavior might have looked from your perspective. Honestly, Harry, you scared me, she confessed. Scared you? How did I scare you? I asked, genuinely confused. She sighed. It was the way you looked at me, always being around. Looking back, I thought it was more like stalking than just a crush. A stalker? I was completely caught off guard. Let me explain, she continued. You didn't know my sister, Abby. She's 6 years older than me and went to state to study IT. There was a guy who kept asking her out, but she wasn't interested. He acted just like you did, constantly watching her, always nearby. Eventually, he attacked her at a party. Luckily, some people heard her yelling and stopped him before it got worse. After that, every time I saw you, I thought of him and what happened to Abby. I sat there stunned. Becky, if you had let me, I would have shown you I'm nothing like that, I said softly. I know that now, she sighed. When you first asked me out, I was into Danny Freeman and trying to get his attention. I turned you down because I didn't want to risk losing him. By the time I realized Danny wasn't interested, Abby's experience was all I could think about. So yes, I acted cold and rude towards you because I thought you were a stalker. Becky paused and sipped her drink. Looking back, I realized I was wrong. But by the time I figured that out, you were already with Polina, and I thought it was too late to say anything. So I just let it go. I leaned back, trying to process everything she had said. Well, I finally replied, I'm glad you don't think I'm some kind of creep anymore. And since you've explained all this, maybe I'll stop calling you Miss Courtney and go back to calling you Becky, if you're okay with that. She smiled softly, but didn't respond immediately. She just stared at me, as if trying to read my mind. After a moment, I stood up. Anyway, I said, I need to find Sarah and make sure she's enjoying herself. I walked away, leaving Becky sitting there, clearly shocked by my reaction. I wasn't sure what she expected after telling me all that, but indifference probably wasn't it. I found Sarah chatting with Randy Combs and Rick Moore. She gave me a questioning look while Randy and Rick glared at me as if to say, go away. Ignoring them, I extended my hand to Sarah. Our dance got interrupted, I said. Let's finish it. Sarah hesitated, clearly not thrilled, but she couldn't refuse without causing a scene. Forcing a smile, she said, Okay, let's go. As we danced, I asked, So, who was supposed to take you home tonight? Randy, she admitted reluctantly. I nodded. Well, I don't want to ruin your night. After this dance, I'll leave. Why do you want to leave? She asked. The plan was for you to end up with Becky tonight. I smiled. Becky and I just had a 10-minute conversation about 6 years of coldness and neglect. Maybe things will be better at work, but that's all that's changed. The music stopped, and I thanked Sarah for the dance, walking her back to Randy and the group. She grabbed my hand, stopping me. Oh no, she said firmly. You're not leaving. The rule is you dance with the one who brought you, and you leave with the one who brought you. You're stuck with me tonight. I raised an eyebrow. Is that the rule from the girl who already arranged for Randy to take her home? She laughed. Rules have exceptions. She pulled me back onto the dance floor, and as we danced, she asked, Why have we never really hung out before, Harry? That's a question only you can answer, Sarah. I asked you many times, but you always said no. I probably had a good reason back then, but I can't remember it now. I'll have to think about it. My problem is, I think I'd like to make it up to you. But Becky's my friend, and she's trying hard to win you over. I don't want to mess that up. I just don't get why she's interested now. From 7th grade until we graduated, she made it clear she didn't care about me. I don't see what's changed. All I know is, she pushed me to bring you here tonight and told me that if things went her way, she'd leave with you. And that made you curious, and now you're interested. Guilty as charged, I chuckled. Don't worry, Sarah, Harry loves the attention. As we danced, I noticed Becky watching us. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but it seemed like every time I glanced over, her eyes were on me. Later, I saw her dancing with Bill Croft, but even then, she kept looking my way. As midnight approached and the party wound down, I took Sarah's hand and went to say goodbye to Marlene. Once in the car, I asked Sarah if she wanted to grab coffee or a bite to eat, and she said yes. So we drove over to the diner on 6th Street. Over coffee and pie, I asked, "Is our night together going to mess things up with Randy?" She shook her head. "No, we hang out sometimes, but there's nothing serious between us. We just look out for each other when we need a date for something." "And what about Becky? How will this affect your friendship with her?" "It shouldn't. I don't see why it would. I was your date, and she can't be mad at me just because you didn't follow her plan. That's today. But what about in the future? I don't know if I'll do this, but let me ask. Do you want to go to the VFW dance with me on Friday?" She was silent for a few seconds, weighing the consequences of saying yes. Then she agreed. On Sunday, after church, I spent the day doing chores around the house and yard, running errands for my mom. Around 4 o'clock, I was pulling weeds from the flower beds when my mom called out that I had a phone call. It was Sarah. "I have to cancel our date on Friday," she said. "Just talk to Becky. She wasn't too upset that last night didn't go as planned. But when I told her about Friday, she freaked out. I don't want to lose one of my best friends over something that probably won't go anywhere." "I understand, Sarah. Maybe another time," I replied. After I hung up, I couldn't stop thinking about Becky and her actions. Why, after years of neglect, was she suddenly so determined? I could accept her explanation for her past behavior at Marlene's party, but why this sudden intensity? It didn't make sense. All day, thoughts of Becky and her new behavior swirled through my mind, then faded, only to come back again. She was used to guys being interested in her, but I hadn't been chasing her. So, was she trying to recruit me as another fan? Did she see me as a challenge? Or had she finally realized how irresistible I am? Of course, that must be it. On Monday morning, I was at my desk in the shipping department when Becky walked in. I smiled at her and said, "Good morning, Becky. How was your weekend?" This caught her off guard, given our past, but she quickly regained her composure. It was normal. Not how I wanted it, but normal. That day was busy, and though Becky and I were around each other, we only talked about work. Tuesday and Wednesday went by the same way. But Thursday afternoon, everything changed. It was a slow day, and I was at my desk going through paperwork while Becky was entering data at a side table. Suddenly, she turned to me and asked, "Are you doing anything tomorrow night?" Her question caught me off guard. I looked at her with a mischievous grin and said, "Excuse me, what are you doing tomorrow night?" "I don't know. Why?" "Well, I want to go to the VFW dance, and I need a date. Since it looks like you're never going to ask me out, I thought I'd ask you." "I'm asking you now," she replied. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I sat there, dumbfounded, trying to process what was happening. "It's a simple question, Harry," she said. "You have two options, yes or no." After shaking off the shock, I finally responded, "I don't think that's a good idea, considering our working relationship and all." "Oh, Harry, in just over a month, we'll both be back at school. I'm just a summer assistant. So, how about it, Harry? Yes or no?" I had always liked Becky, right? But by college, I'd accepted that she was out of reach. And here she was, taking the first step. As I sat there, a small war raged in my mind. One side said, "This is too good to be true, Harry." The other side argued, "Come on, this is what you've always wanted." The first side warned, "This will end badly." But the other side whispered, "She clearly wants to get to know you better. What's the harm?" Some other guy might have looked at the years of frustration and said, "No way." But I wasn't that guy. "Yes," I said. "What?" "Yes, I'd like to take you to the VFW dance on Friday." When I picked Becky up on Friday, I was reminded why I'd been so obsessed with her since 7th grade. She looked stunning in her little black dress and heels. I got a great view of her legs as I helped her into the truck. As I got into my seat, Becky said, "I've been thinking about this a lot." "Thinking about what?" I asked. "Why I acted the way I did back then. I guess I'm trying to figure out what I missed by being so awful to you in school." "The truth is you didn't miss much. I was so nervous around you that I could barely think straight. I probably would have done something ridiculous and embarrassed myself." "Were you really that into me?" Past tense. "So I've lost my charm over the years?" she teased. The fact that we're both in this truck right now should answer that. I had a great time at the dance. There were a few familiar faces, including Sarah and Randy. And we ended up pushing some tables together. Becky and I danced well together, moving smoothly across the floor. During a slow song, she leaned in and rested her head on my shoulder, and I couldn't help but curse the gods for not letting this happen sooner. I danced a few times with Sarah and a couple of other girls, but throughout the night, Becky and I kept gravitating back to each other. During a waltz, Sarah said, "Looks like I missed my chance." I laughed. "You had plenty of chances. Every time I asked you out, you turned me down." That's because I was always dating someone when you asked. You should have kept trying. Eventually, you would have caught me when I wasn't seeing anyone. Well, crap. If only I'd known. It's not too late. If things don't work out with Becky, you can always give me a call. Yeah, and then you'll tell me, sorry, I'm dating someone now. If that happens, I'd drop him before missing another chance with you. I thought to myself, what's going on with these girls? Suddenly, I was the flavor of the month. I know what you're thinking, Harry, Sarah said, giving me a knowing look. Want to bet? You're wondering why girls are suddenly showing interest in you, right? Yeah. There are a couple of reasons. First, the girls are talking. Polina gave you high marks, so now that she's out of the picture, others want to see what she found so great. Second, it's simple human nature. Someone else wants it, and suddenly, everyone else does too. The song ended, and Sarah led me back to our table. Her words echoed in my mind about half an hour later while I was dancing with Nancy Wilda. Are you seeing anyone now that Polina's gone? She asked. I've dated a few people, but nothing serious. I know the feeling. Ever since Rory went full-time at Florida State, I've been at a loss, too. I wasn't dumb. I recognized an invitation when I heard one. I started wondering if Sarah was right about everything. Later, on my way back from the bathroom, Rita Dutchman stopped me. Hey, Harry, I haven't seen you in ages. I've been busy with school and work. How about you? Same here. I heard you haven't dated anyone since Polina. You've got my number. Give me a call. She hurried into the women's restroom, and I couldn't help but think back to what Sarah had said. Gail was my first, and for a while I thought I was doing well. Then she told me she had a date with Eddie Catron. I was young and a bit naive back then. After her, I dated a few others with no success until I met Helen Geneva. We dated for a while, but she ended up giving me the same line Gail had. Then came Polina. By that point, I knew that Zex didn't mean a relationship would last. I was aware Polina wouldn't be around long since she was heading back east for college, only coming home during breaks. But then something happened that made me question everything. I had just sat back down after walking Nancy to her seat. I took a sip of my iced tea, no alcohol since I was driving. As I set my glass down, Becky asked, Am I going to have to fight to leave here with you tonight? I had no idea what she was talking about, so I just stared at her, confused. It's obvious that almost every girl you've danced with tonight wants you. I half expected Corin to drag you off the dance floor. Bev looks at you like a cat eyeing a mouse ready to pounce. And even Sarah, who backstabbed me, is giving off I want to take him home vibes. So do I need to fight for the rest of the evening? I swear, I didn't know where it came from. But I found myself saying, anything worth having is worth fighting for. A strange look crossed her face, and then she said, That's it, we're leaving. She grabbed her purse, stood up, and pulled me toward the exit, taking my hand in a possessive way. I was caught off guard and reacted slowly, but I followed her. As soon as we got into the car, she kissed me. I'm not easy to get, Harry, but I go after what I want, and right now, I want you. Find us a bed. I was a little dazed by how quickly the night had turned. But dazed or not, there was no way I was going to say no to the girl I'd been obsessed with since 7th grade. It only took me 9 minutes to get to the Bide, a small motel on Colfax, and 4 minutes to check into a room. Once we were inside, Becky looked me in the eyes while undressing and said, Time for the truth, Harry. I know you're dying to understand why I've changed so suddenly, so here it is. You have what I want. At least I hope you do. I stood there, stunned, while she stood in front of me, gorgeous and without clothes, and I felt like a fool, still fully clothed and just staring. She shook her head, maybe in frustration. I must be losing my touch. Usually by the time I take off my bra, the guy is already undressed and waiting. I guess I'll have to undress you myself. She walked up to me, reaching for the buttons on my shirt. Something in my mind snapped me out of my shock. I grabbed her wrist just as she touched my shirt. Why? I asked. Why what, Harry? Why all this, the hotel room? You didn't have to do that. After tonight's date, I would have asked you out again, and I know you know that. So, why take this big step? I told you. It's time for the truth, Harry. The simple truth is that unless Polina was lying, you've got what I want. And, after what I saw on the dance floor tonight, it's clear the other girls want it too. I decided I'd better lock you down before someone else does. I still didn't understand the connection with Polina. What could she have said at one of your sleepovers to get you interested in me? Polina told us about your skills. So, I'm just a plaything for the night? And tomorrow you'll go back to ignoring me? She rolled her eyes. Be serious, Harry. If Polina wasn't lying, do you think I'd let you go that easily? And what if you're bad in bed? I have my standards, you know. Her expression turned angry. Bad in bed? I'll show you something, you jerk. And she did. We made love. Not bad. I think you'll do. I was about to say something sarcastic, but paused to consider her words. I think you'll do. Did that mean she was sticking around? If so, I figured I should just keep quiet. I woke up first, sitting up in bed and leaning against the headboard, looking at her and wondering what would come next. When she woke, she rubbed her eyes and looked at me. It's not that bad. What's not? I asked. Whatever's on your mind. It can't be as bad as it looks on your face. How do you know what I'm thinking? It's written all over your face. Let me make it easy for you. No, you don't have to rush me home. Knowing my mom, she's probably not even back yet. I raised an eyebrow, and she noticed. Later, let's cover the next items. No, we're not going to shop for wedding rings today. And no, we're not telling our moms to start planning a wedding. That's all. It didn't end there. She paused, then grinned mischievously. Are we doing this before the shower, in the shower, or after? I vote for all three. She couldn't hold back her laugh, and we moved on from there. We checked out of the motel, tossed the key on the counter, and went to Denny's for breakfast. As we sat down and ordered, Becky brought it up again. I noticed your eyebrow raise when I mentioned my mom and where she probably is. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. My dad died 6 years ago. My mom's a beautiful woman, still healthy and active. She grieved for about a year, then started looking for someone new. She always says no one compares to my dad. I told her she'd never find anyone like him because he was one of a kind and she'd have to settle for second best. She took a sip of her coffee and continued. She's still looking, but let's be real. She's a healthy woman who needs a sex life. She doesn't want to set a bad example for me, so she never brings them home. She thinks I don't know what's going on when she says she stayed over at a friend's house because she drank too much. I listened, taking it all in. Now that we've cleared that up, let's get back to us. Did you enjoy last night? Definitely. Do you want more? Same answer. She looked at me seriously. So much that you'd give up all the other girls? I frowned, but before I could respond, she continued. I'm not talking about getting married. I'm asking if you can be exclusive. I stared at her, unsure of what she meant. I don't get it. Oh, you get it. You're just not ready to admit it yet. Let me spell it out. She leaned in slightly. I went into last night thinking that if Polina wasn't lying, I'd keep you for myself. But if she was, it'd just be a one-night thing. Turns out Polina didn't lie. She couldn't even do you justice. Becky paused, letting me absorb what she was saying, then continued. Last night happened because I saw how the other girls were looking at you. It was obvious to me that a few of them were planning to make a move. I don't share my toys, so... Can you be exclusive with me, or are you going to want to sample everything else? This possibility hadn't crossed my mind when we entered the room the night before. I thought Becky just wanted to satisfy her curiosity, and that it would only be a one-night thing. I wasn't going to lie. Sure, I'd love to be like a kid in a candy store. But the other girls Becky mentioned, and even a few she didn't, weren't the ones I had been thinking about since 7th grade. In other words, they were attractive, some even sexy, but they weren't Becky. If Becky gives me exclusivity, I thought, then there will be exclusivity. I smiled at her and said, I can be faithful. And I was. Over the next month, the girls Becky had mentioned, and a few she hadn't, did try to win me over, but I wasn't interested. Why would I be? Becky had set a new standard. She was my platinum standard. But things changed when we returned to school. One morning, as we were walking from our 10 o'clock classes to the student cafeteria, I casually asked her what she wanted to do on Saturday night. I'm going to the Tim McGraw concert. Damn, girl, couldn't you have given me more of a heads up? I'm not sure I can get tickets last minute. Greg already bought them. I stopped in my tracks. Greg? Yeah, I'm going with Greg. Greg was a guy who had transferred from another university and was in several of our business classes. I let her words sink in. Let me get this straight. You're going on a date with Greg Mortison this Saturday? That's right. By then, we had reached the dining room, and Becky turned to go inside. I kept walking. I heard her call out, "Wait, Harry," but I ignored her and hurried off. That afternoon, we both had a business class, but thankfully we had assigned seats, so I didn't have to sit next to her. She sat near the front, 2 seats away from Greg, which I couldn't help but notice. I was seated in the back, far enough to leave before she could catch up to me. For the rest of the day, we didn't have any shared activities, but I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. That evening at work, I tried to keep my distance, but Becky wasn't making it easy. Finally, about 10 minutes before the end of the shift, she approached me. "What's wrong with you, Harry? Why are you acting like this?" I looked at her coldly. You're in college, Miss Courtney, so you can't be that dense. What did you think would happen when you told me you were going on a date with another guy? It's not like that, Harry. He just had concert tickets and asked if I wanted to go. You know how much I love Tim McGraw. Then, Miss Courtney, you should have asked me to get tickets when you found out about the concert. But you didn't, did you? Remember our first night together? When you talked about fidelity and demanded exclusivity? I didn't realize that only applied to me. Silly me. Shame on me for being so naive. Her face went pale. That's not how it is, Harry. Isn't it? Well, now I know our relationship is so fragile that it crumbles over a concert ticket. If you'll excuse me, I need to go find a date for Friday. I turned and walked away from her. That night, I told my mom everything and asked her not to take any calls from Becky. I went out to the patio, sat down at my desk, and started working on a paper I had due next week. After dinner, I decided to follow through with what I told Becky. I was going to find a date for Friday. Then an idea hit me, one that made me smile with a hint of mischief. Who better to take out than one of the girls Becky was so worried about the night we first got together? My first choice was Sarah, but even though she had told me to call if things didn't work out with Becky, she was still Becky's best friend. No matter how mad I was, I didn't want to ruin their friendship. So I decided to call Nancy Wilder instead. To my surprise, she agreed to the date right away. The question, "What about Becky?" only came after she said yes. I told her Becky had decided to date other guys and expected me to just go along with it. But that wasn't going to happen. We set a time for Friday and I got back to working on my essay. I managed to avoid Becky at school, but not at work. Still, I couldn't understand her sarcastic attitude when she saw me. "Mr. Macho got a date for Friday?" she asked, mocking me. I matched her sarcasm. "None of your business, Miss Courtney." She smirked. "I thought so. Call me when you're tired of hearing no." I walked away and tried to avoid her for the rest of my shift. The next day, I was sitting in the cafeteria, reviewing notes from my last class, when Becky walked in. She glanced around, saw me, and headed straight for me. I quickly gathered my things and stood up just as she sat down. "Where are you going, Harry?" I ignored her and walked out. That Friday, I picked Nancy up at 7, and we went to the Outback Steakhouse for dinner. Afterward, we headed to the VFW for the Friday night dance. We had a great time, though a few people gave us curious looks when they realized I wasn't with Becky. We left around 11 and stopped by the Village Inn for cake and coffee. We'd been there about 15 minutes when Becky and her date walked in. They were laughing and enjoying each other's company until Becky spotted us. The surprise on her face was unmistakable when she saw that I had a date, and with one of the girls she had been worried about. Her eyes met mine, and I turned my attention back to Nancy. Sensing the tension, Nancy said quietly, "Becky hasn't stopped staring at us since she sat down. Are you sure it's over between you two?" I shrugged. "Think about it, Nance. Is she sitting with me or with another guy? I just didn't want to be the one to ruin your relationship." "Relax. I didn't call you until after she told me she wanted to date other guys." Nancy still seemed uneasy. "Can we leave? I don't feel comfortable with her sitting there staring at us." We left the restaurant, and once we were in the car, I asked, "What do you want to do next?" She surprised me by saying, "I was hoping you'd take me to a motel." My shock must have shown because she quickly added, "Let's be honest, Harry, you don't have strong feelings for me beyond sympathy. It's just sympathy, right? We don't have a future. Just a few dates." I didn't know what to say, so I nodded. She continued, "I had a great relationship with Rory. We made love 3 or 4 times a week until he left for Florida. I haven't had sex since, and I can't wait any longer." I was puzzled. "Nance, you're a beautiful girl. There must be plenty of guys who'd want to date you. They're out there, but all they want is sex. And while my body wants that too, I don't want to turn my life into a series of one-night stands. So what makes me different?" "You're a good guy, Harry. You're not an a-hole. And Paulina said you wouldn't let me down." I chuckled. "But according to you, I'm just a temporary fix. No deep feelings, just sympathy. Right?" She smiled softly. "There are different kinds of one-night connections, Harry. Some guys just want to brag. Hey, I hooked up with Nancy. Then there are others who wake up the next morning, smile, say thanks, and leave without making a big deal of it. Paulina said you're the second kind. The kind of guy who can have a no-strings relationship." I thought about it for a moment and then smiled at her. "I guess I can be your plaything for the night." Nancy enjoyed the night as much as Paulina and Becky had. But since I had to take her home, we didn't spend the whole night together. However, we did make plans to meet again the next day. On Saturday, we spent the day at a motel, and on Sunday, we met at her house while her parents were out. By the time I got home that evening, I realized I liked the setup. sex without commitment. Nancy and I could remain friends with benefits as long as she was willing, and there would be no hard feelings when it ended. We agreed to stay exclusive while we were seeing each other, even though it was just for fun. I avoided Becky at school on Monday, but I couldn't dodge her at work. To my surprise, she was friendly and didn't bring up the situation. I was relieved, but also a little annoyed. I didn't want drama, but part of me felt she should at least try to fix what she had messed up. Finally, on Wednesday, Becky brought it up. I was getting a Coke from the break room when she walked in. She grabbed a bottle of water and sat down across from me. "I heard you and Nancy Wilder have been spending a lot of time together," she said, without looking at me. I took a sip of my drink and nodded. Was I so easily replaced? "As I recall, you ended our so-called exclusive relationship, which gave me the chance to meet others. Nancy was the first to say yes when I started calling." She scowled. "Damn it, Harry. Why can't you understand that going to the concert with Greg didn't mean anything?" I set my drink down, my patience running out. "Maybe it didn't mean much to you, but it meant a lot to me. It meant I couldn't trust you." "That's ridiculous, Harry." "No, it's not, Becky, and you know it." She sighed in frustration. "Do you really believe that?" "Of course I do, Becky. Here's how I imagine it. You mention to someone that you love Tim McGraw, Greg overhears, sees an opportunity, buys tickets, and lets you know he has an extra one. You couldn't get a ticket because they sold out, so Greg was your only option." She crossed her arms. "For God's sake, Harry, it was just a concert." I shook my head. "No, it wasn't just a concert. Greg knew you were my girlfriend. Everyone did. He went after you anyway, and you went along with it." I stood up, checking the time. "I need to get back to work." Without waiting for her response, I walked out. After that conversation, Becky started avoiding me, which I was relieved about. The drama was finally over. Nancy and I lasted another 2 months before she ended things. She met someone she thought could be a long-term partner. I wished her the best, and life moved on. With a busy schedule full of essays and research projects, I stayed away from dating for a while. Becky and I were both studying to be business managers, so we still shared classes. We were cordial, but we didn't talk much, usually just exchanging nods when we crossed paths. When I finally got back into dating, I would occasionally see Becky with other guys. It was never the same person, and I never saw her with Greg again. Meanwhile, the girl I was dating was the same one every time Becky saw us. Another one of the girls Becky had been worried about when we first got together. However, this time was different. Marge wasn't one of those girls who just wanted to see what I was like in bed. She was actually a bit cautious when I first asked her out. It was at a VFW dance, and I had come alone, not looking for anything serious, just wanting to dance and have a good time. I had been there for about an hour when I saw Marge come in, sit at a table, and check her watch constantly. I walked up to her and asked, "Want some company while you wait? We could chat or dance until your friend arrives." Marge smiled and said, "That sounds nice." I sat down and asked, "Will they mind?" "Not he. It's Anna I'm waiting for," she replied. "What happened to Mike?" I asked. "Chelsea Marks happened," she said with a hint of bitterness. Sensing it was better not to dig deeper, I asked her to dance. Anna never showed, so Marge and I spent the evening talking, dancing, and enjoying ourselves. By the end of the night, I asked her out on a date. "I'm not sure, Harry," she said. "I just got rid of a jerk, and I'm not looking to date anyone right now." "So, are you calling me an a-hole?" I teased. "I don't know, Harry. Are you? You dated Becky and she dumped you. Then you dated Nancy and she dumped you too. So what's wrong with you, Harry?" She continued, "I'm not stupid. I know why those girls went after you. They wanted to see if what they heard was true. Apparently, it was because they stayed for a while, but eventually they both left. The real question is, why?" I looked at her for a moment before saying, "I could tell you, but you'd probably think I'm full of it. If you really want to know, ask Becky or Nancy." "Thanks for the dance, Marge. Take care," I said, getting up and leaving. The next day was a work Saturday, and Dad decided I had learned all I could about shipping and receiving, so he moved me to accounting. That meant I didn't work alongside Becky anymore. At lunch, I was sitting in the break room with a Coke and some chips when Becky walked in and, for the first time in weeks, sat down with me. "I got a weird call last night," she said. I kept eating, waiting for her to continue. "Marge Collins called and asked why I left you," she said. "Why'd she do that?" I asked. "You'll have to ask her," Becky replied. "I didn't leave you, Harry. You pushed me away by acting stupid. I didn't want it to end, but you made it happen. So go tell that to Marge." I got up and went back to work. 2 weeks later, I saw Marge again at another VFW dance. This time, I was sitting alone since all the bar stools were taken. Marge walked in, saw me, and approached. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "Are you sure you want to be seen with a jerk?" I replied a bit coldly. She sat down and said, "That's not the attitude we need. If this is going to work, we need to see if there's anything worth building on. You asked me out, Harry, and I didn't say no. I just had some questions, and you pointed me to where I could find the answers. So I did. Now, the only question is, when are we going on that first date?" "How about tomorrow?" I suggested. "Dinner and a movie." "I like that," she said with a smile. "Now let's go dance." We spent the night dancing, drinking, and chatting. I found out Marge had called both Becky and Nancy. Nancy had already told me she regretted breaking up and that her new guy didn't compare. Marge eventually shared Becky's reaction, too. Becky had been upset when she learned I was seeing Marge, hoping I'd come back to her after my fling with Nancy. She apologized for what happened between us. I shrugged and said, "That was her choice. Let's go dance." The date with Marge went great. I got a nice kiss when I dropped her off and set up another date for Tuesday, which led to several more. After our 5th date, as I walked her to the door, she asked, "Are you going to make the first move, or do I have to?" I hesitated, remembering our earlier conversation about not being like other guys. "Oh, come on, Harry," she said. "We've been over this. It's time we went to bed." She opened the door and led me in. It was a long night, but since it was my free Saturday, I didn't have to worry about work. The next morning, over breakfast, she asked, "What's the plan for today?" "Whatever you want," I replied. "Don't think you can keep up all day and still be good tonight," she teased. "I thought you loved me, not just saw me as a toy," I joked. "Well, you like it," she grinned. "Probably," I admitted. We had a great weekend together, but after the school year ended, Marge left for Arizona and never came back. I never heard from her again. During the summer, I worked full-time, and so did Becky. We were polite, but kept our distance, just exchanging greetings in passing. One Wednesday, while I was in the break room, Becky sat across from me. "Harry, I need a big favor," she said. "I need a date for Friday and Saturday." "Why me?" I asked. "Because my family loves you." "I don't get it." "It's my cousin Carol's wedding. My family doesn't like my boyfriend and told me not to bring him. They love you, though, and always said I shouldn't have let you go. Please help me." I didn't have any plans, and since it didn't feel like a real date, I agreed. Becky explained the details. We'd drive to her uncle's house in Fairmont on Friday, relax by the pool before the rehearsal dinner, and then either leave after the wedding Saturday night or stay until Sunday. I thought she might use the car ride to suggest getting back together, but she only talked about school and work. She mentioned her dad was moving her into purchasing, which I already knew, and that he was rotating her through different departments in the family business. What she didn't mention was that her uncle had a mansion. When we arrived, I met her Uncle Aaron, call me Ron, and her Aunt Rabbit, call me Tubby, along with her cousin Carol, the bride-to-be. Tubby said she had set us up in the West Wing and invited us to join them by the pool. Becky showed me my room, told me to change into swim trunks, and meet her in the hallway. When I came out, Becky was waiting wearing a swimsuit that barely qualified as one, grinning as she knew the effect it would have. "Lead the way," I said, trying to stay calm. When we got to the pool, I noticed there were two, an Olympic-sized one for laps and a smaller kidney-shaped one for lounging. I also realized Becky wasn't the exception. Most of Carol's friends were wearing revealing swimsuits, just like hers. Even the older women, though were dressed more modestly. One older woman stood out, nearly 6 feet tall with long black hair, green eyes, and an amazing figure. Becky caught me staring and said, "No, you wouldn't." I quickly agreed, "No, I wouldn't." "Take her to your cave and keep her busy," Becky joked, pulling me toward her. "Aunt Abby, this is Harry," Becky introduced. "Harry, meet my Aunt Abby." Aunt Abby gave me a once-over and said, "If you lose him, give me a call. He looks tasty." Becky laughed and said, "Watch out, Harry. Aunt Abby's been through 4 husbands. She'll chew you up and spit you out." Abby chuckled. "I'm not that bad." "Says the woman with 4 ex-husbands," Becky teased. Aunt Abby grinned. "Don't push me or I might steal him from you." Becky turned to me and asked, "Could she steal you?" I paused before saying, "Yeah, she could." They both laughed, and Becky said, "I better get you away from her." As we walked away, I glanced back, and Aunt Abby winked. Beauty clearly ran in Becky's family. The guys at the pool were the only ones I hadn't met. I introduced myself after jumping in, and one guy came over. "You with Becky?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm Tom marrying Carol," he said, shaking my hand. "If I had a shot, I'd be going for Aunt Abby." I laughed and told him, "Good luck. She said she'd steal me if she wanted." Tom laughed. "Go for it." We swam for a bit, and then Becky said it was time to get ready for dinner. Becky looked amazing, and I wasn't too bad in my suit and tie. The rehearsal and dinner went smoothly, and we sat with Becky's cousins. They spent the evening trying to figure out my relationship with Becky. She let them believe we might have a future, but I didn't correct them. When the band started, I danced with Becky's mom, Aunt Tubby, and even her grandma, which Becky found hilarious. "When we get married, I'll have to keep you on a tight leash," she joked. I was too busy enjoying myself to remind her I was just there for the weekend. The best part of the night was when Aunt Abby took my hand and led me to the dance floor. "I wish I could get to know you better," she said playfully, but with a serious undertone. After a pause, she added, "Do I have a chance?" Startled, I asked, "What?" "You're fooling everyone, but not me," she said. "It's obvious Becky's in love with you, and you don't feel the same. Am I right?" Caught off guard, I nodded. "Tell me," she pressed. "I'm just her date for the weekend," I admitted. She didn't want to come alone, so I agreed. "There's more to this," she said, eyes narrowing. "Becky's feelings are clear to everyone." When the music stopped, I tried to lead her back, but she held my hand and said, "No, come with me." She took me out to the terrace and asked me to tell her everything. Sitting next to her, I felt the same attraction everyone must feel around her. She used that charm, and I found myself spilling everything. She listened and then laughed. "Oh, poor boy. Do you really think girls want you just because you're good in bed? Has it ever occurred to you that after being with you, they might want to stay because they've realized you're more than just Zex? How many of them actually stayed?" "They all left me," I said, shaking my head. "So Zex must be all I've got going for me." "That's nonsense, Harry, and you know it," she said firmly. "You knew what you had with Nancy from the start, and with Marge, you have no idea why she disappeared. She could have been in an accident, lying in a hospital somewhere for all you know. And as for Becky, she didn't leave. You pushed her away. Why couldn't you accept what she said and move forward?" I didn't have an answer, so I stayed quiet. "I can tell from the way my niece acts that she really wants to be with you. Why not give it another shot, Harry? What do you have to lose?" We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "So, are you really that good in bed, Harry?" "Some girls seem to think so," I said quietly. "Well, I'll make you a deal," she said, leaning in. "Give my niece another chance. If it doesn't work out, I'll sleep with you myself. It's a win-win for you, Harry. Think about it." She stood up and said, "The music's playing again. Let's dance." As we walked back inside, I could feel all eyes on us. Everyone was wondering what I'd been doing with Aunt Abby out on the terrace. We danced to 3 songs, and then I escorted her back to her table. When I returned to mine, Becky was still on the dance floor with her cousin, so I avoided any questions, for the moment at least. Becky stayed on the dance floor for another song, this time dancing with the best man. I was watching them when Becky's mom pulled me up from my seat and onto the dance floor. "So, what were you and my sister doing out on the terrace?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Trying to be lighthearted, I said, "She wanted my body, but I fought her off." "Don't give me that nonsense, young man," she said sternly. "First, we both know if Abby wanted you, she would have had you. Second, Abby would never poach a man from her family. And third, she loves Becky. She's her godmother, for heaven's sake. She wouldn't hurt her for anything. She just wanted to know your intentions toward Becky, that's all." "You think we were out there that long? Just for that?" I asked, irritation creeping into my voice. "Just answering questions," I said, growing frustrated. "If you need to know what happened, ask Abby herself." The music stopped, and I led her back to the table, but she grabbed my hand, trying to stop me. "I'm not done talking to you yet," she said firmly. "This is what's called a conflict of interest, Mrs. Courtney. You want to talk, but I don't," I said, pulling my hand away. I left her standing there and returned to my table. When I got back, Becky was sitting there, her expression a mix of disbelief and confusion. "You just walked away from my mom and left her standing on the dance floor?" she asked. "Yes," I replied flatly. "How could you do that? How could you be so rude?" "It was easy," I said, my frustration bubbling up. "I'm tired of the women in your family meddling where they don't belong." "Is that what happened with Aunt Abby?" Becky asked, clearly upset. "See? Even you're doing it now," I snapped. "Everyone's dying to know what happened between me and Aunt Abby. It's nobody's business but hers and mine. Enough already, let's dance." "I don't think so," Becky said, crossing her arms. "You've just managed to ruin the mood." "Oh no, don't pin this on me," I shot back. "It was your attitude when I sat down that started all this. Instead of accusing me, you should have waited and talked to your mom to find out what really happened." I stood up, and Becky asked, "Where are you going?" "You don't want to dance, and I don't want to sit here and drink. I'm going back to my room." I left her sitting there and went back to my room at Uncle Aaron's. As I lay in bed, I considered packing up and heading home, but I decided to be responsible for once. I had brought Becky here, so I needed to take her home. Not that she couldn't manage on her own, but doing the right thing was important. I was nearly asleep when I heard a knock on the door. I got up, reaching for the doorknob when I heard, "Open up, Harry, it's Abby." I opened the door, but instead of Aunt Abby, Becky walked in, closing the door behind her. "I wasn't sure you'd open it for me, but I knew you'd open it for Aunt Abby," she said, a bit frustrated. "You can be such an a-hole sometimes, but you're my a-hole. You need to get over it, Harry. You're mine, and I'm not leaving, whether you like it or not." I raised an eyebrow and asked, "So, I don't have a say in this?" "No," she said firmly, shaking her head. "I've decided I'll be the mother of your kids and your bedmate until death do us part." I laughed, but Becky remained serious. "Okay, I admit I acted stupid when Greg waved those Tim McGraw tickets in front of me. But what were you thinking back then? All he got was a goodnight kiss on the cheek, nothing more. I never went out with him again, even though he asked a dozen times." She softened, then continued, "I realized you'd probably leave if I didn't gather the strength to follow you. I remember someone once told me, if it's worth having, it's worth fighting for. So here we are. I'm not letting you go. You can push me away or say, don't think like that, but I'll always be there. If you're on a date, I'll be your shadow, Harry. Always." Becky sat down beside me and added, "I have a tool, you know. Your dad likes me. I'll be a great daughter-in-law and give him wonderful grandchildren. I'll even ask him to make sure we always work together, so I'm close enough to wear you down. Don't resist, Harry. I always get what I want, and I want you." 3 months after graduation, we got married. Over the next 5 years, she gave my parents 3 beautiful grandchildren. Looking back, I'm glad Becky believed everything worth having was worth fighting for, and that she got what she wanted. I developed a great relationship with Becky's family, especially the women. At every social event or dance, I'd spend most of the evening with them, including Aunt Abby, who was now on her 6th husband. At one of the dances, Aunt Abby said, "I guess I'll never get to find out what you're like in bed, will I?" Knowing how to push buttons, I smiled and replied, "I don't know about that. You're Becky's favorite aunt. If you ask her, she might let you borrow me." Aunt Abby stopped, took a step back, then burst into loud laughter. Everyone in the room turned to see what was going on. I don't think anyone had ever seen Aunt Abby lose her cool in public like that before. From the looks on the faces of the other women, I knew I'd be telling this story later. I escorted Aunt Abby back to her seat and excused myself to use the restroom. When I returned, I saw Becky and Aunt Abby talking, both smiling. I sat down, and Becky turned to me and said, "Aunt Abby and I were just talking. You know she's my favorite aunt, right? Well, she has a request." I glanced at Aunt Abby, who had a mischievous grin on her face. I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, Harry, what have you gotten yourself into now?" They both saw my expression and burst out laughing.